Hello everyone, we're responding to one of the comments in one of my videos. Let that be an incentive for all of you to leave more comments on my videos, because I might respond with a whole lecture just for you. Okay, so this is going to be an introduction to Kabbalah. Kabbalah is the mystical side, or the esoteric side, the spiritual side of the Torah being the body of knowledge which we have from God, given to us. We're going to have a very quick overview of what the Torah is, and we'll see how the Kabbalah fits into that. Okay, so first of all, you have two essential parts of the Torah. In fact, you could call them two Torahs. You've got the written Torah and the oral Torah. The written Torah being the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Right? And you've got the 8 books of the prophets. I'll say them in Hebrew. You could probably recognize them in English. I just be much quicker like this. It'll be Yeshua, Shoftim, Judges, Shemuel, Melochim, Kings, Yeshaya, Isaiah, Yirmiyah, Jeremiah, Yechezkel, Ezekiel, and Treasa. 12 books of the smaller prophets, because the books are much smaller, so they don't have their own book in themselves. They're just a collection of the 12. There's deeper reasons why it has to be in one book, but we're not going to go into that now. There's a great significance in the number of books of the Tanakh, which we're going to speak about in a second. So that's Hosea, Yoel, Amos, Avadia, Yonah, Micha, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai. Oh, I missed one out. Nochum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. I think that's all 12. Yeah, I'm do my go over them, do revision over that. Yeah, that would be a bit awkward if I didn't remember all the books. And then you've got the 11 books of the writings, which are Tehillim, that's Psalms, Mishlei, Proverbs, Eob, Job. Then you've got the 5 Megillos, Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs, Ruth, Eicho, Lamentations, Koheles is Ecclesiastes, and Esther, the book of Esther. Then you've got the book of Daniel. Then you've got the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. That's counted as one book, and the book of Chronicles. So you've got in total 24 books of the Tanakh. Tanakh being Tov Nun Chaf, Torah, Nevi'im, prophets, and Kesuvim, the writings. And there's a very deep Kabbalistic significance in the 24 books. What they are exactly, why it has to be 24. We're not going into that now, unless you leave a comment, then I could tell you, right? Because that's very, very detailed. Right. So that's the written Torah is essentially those 24 books, right? The main being the first 5, the ones of the books of the Torah, which is basically where all the laws and all the essentials come from there. The prophets are more focused on telling us about what will happen in the future and chastising the Jewish people and giving us lessons to help us practically keep the Torah and tell us, it's important to keep it. Look what happened in this generation. They didn't keep it, and when they kept it, everything was good. Some put it very nicely, what Nevi'im and the Kesuvim are. But I think that was part of the idea there, right? It's sort of like the Musa, what happens when you don't keep the Torah, kind of. But it's obviously much more than that. And Kesuvim is the writings. That's the sort of more sort of, I don't know, a lot of it's lots of the philosophy of the Torah, I guess. Ideas, Psalms about praising God, Proverbs, idea of the philosophy, King Solomon, Koheles, Ecclesiastes, same sort of thing there. Anyway, so that's the written Torah. The written Torah is essentially just consonants, essentially, without any vowels, without any punctuation notes, without any cantillation notes, which shows you how to, if those familiar with Eastern languages, how you say speaking's got a certain tune to it, how the inflection of your voice when you say certain words can give a different implication, right? And then you have something called the Oral Torah. The Oral Torah was actually given before the written Torah. The written Torah was only written at the end of the 40 years of the wilderness, 40 years after the Jewish people came out of Egypt. They were there for 40 years before they entered the land of Israel, and the Torah was finally written down by Moses, and this is recorded in chapter 31 in Deuteronomy, about Moses writing down the Torah. So that means that all the study of the Torah, which is referred to beforehand, was actually the Oral Torah, which is the idea of the concepts of the Torah, how to apply the Torah to daily life, right? How to keep the commandments practically, all the details of something which you would expect from a modern day law term, right? It's telling you how to keep the laws, right? You might have a few abstract things like this means that, this is that, do not do that, yeah. But then you need all the subparagraphs, the paragraphs and the subparagraphs to explain all the details and the nuance. What do we mean when we say this? When we say don't do work on the Sabbath, what do you mean work? What do you mean do? What does it mean to do something? Yeah, can it be something which I just turning a light switch on, let's say, a modern application, right? Turning a light switch on. Am I allowed to bump into a light switch as opposed to pressing it? Is that called doing even, right? So every single detail has nuance to it. Okay. So the Oral Torah was basically given to Moses at Sinai, right? And he, throughout the 40 years in the desert, he was teaching the Jewish people. And it goes through the verses speak about how he did it. He spoke to Aaron, and then they together said it over to the elders and then to the rest of the Jewish people. So that is the idea of the Oral Torah, right? All the details. Now, the Oral Torah is much more complex than the written Torah. In the Oral Torah, you have many different parts, many different layers. You've got the basic layer, which is basically the translation of the words, right? Basically how to read the words, how to translate it, to get a basic idea of the literal narrative, the stories of the Torah, or the literal understanding, basic understanding of the laws. Like if it says, Lo tirtzach, do not kill, or do not murder, right? It means don't murder. Pretty straightforward, right? You should guard the Sabbath, right? You should guard the Sabbath, right? Guard it. Guard it from what? From people throwing rocks? What are you guarding it from? Yeah, you have to guard it by guarding its laws. So already you're getting more into the explanations now. But on the basic level, the Torah can always be understood on the literal level, except the first chapter in Genesis, where you also take the words literally, but literal there, since the world was in flux, it wasn't fully formed yet, therefore concepts weren't fully formed yet, so therefore translating the words there do not necessarily have the same meaning as it does after the creation was fixed. I think the Maimonides says something along those lines. So it is literal even there, but you have to understand what does heavens and earth mean, right? Does it mean heavens like the sky we have and the earth? But we know there's much more than that, right? So when talking about in Bereshit, heavens generally refers to the spiritual realms, and Oretz, land, refers to not just the physical ground, refers to the whole physical dimension. For example, okay, so that's one level. The next level, so that's called Pshat. So there's 4 basic levels of understanding the Torah, right? Of the Torah generally. This is not specifically the Oral Torah, but the Oral Torah is just basically expanding and deriving information from the written in some form. And we see it's a bit more complicated than that, but hopefully we'll cover everything. In the lecture we gave on Purim this year, we went into the idea of the Oral Torah on one aspect of it, which was a very fundamental idea. And we'll bring a quick metaphor just to bring out this idea, if I remember. I'll keep all these ideas in my head. Then you've got the level of remez. Remez is hints. So let's say you've got the verse can hint something, like it's not explicit, but if you read it, that's interesting. Why did it write it like that? If all the Torah wanted to tell us was keep this law, whatever it is, why did it write it like that? Why the extra word? Why does it put the words back to front? Oh, maybe it's giving us another hidden sort of message. It's telling us something. A new idea. Oh, very nice. Right. Okay. Or using other tools of the Oral Torah. The Oral Torah contains lots of tools in order to extract information from the written Torah. Right. So the first one is how to read the words. That means where the vowels are, where the what's it called? The punctuation is, right? That lets you read the Torah at all, because it's not just consonants now. It's actually you can break into the words, you can read the words, you can understand the words, translate them. That is called Pshat. Pshat means the basic, the open, spread out, uncovered level of the Torah. That means the more exposed level, which is basically the basic meaning, the basic translation, which that would be the same as how non-Jews would read the Torah as well. Just read it, translate if you're reading from the Hebrew, and coming to a conclusion based on the basic translation. The second level will be the remez. Remez using certain tools or just noticing discrepancies or anomalies in the way that the verse is written, and getting sort of ideas out that way. And this includes things called gematria. We look at the numerical value of certain words. So if the word is written in an unusual way and it's got an extra vav in it, right? It reads the same, but it's got an extra letter in it, which is a silent letter. Why did it put that extra letter in it? Is it so we should look at the numerical value? Oh, the numerical value ends up this. So this is connected with this other idea which has the same numerical value, right? For example, right? Or you've got the pattern of the word. If you've got something which is we spoke about this in the lecture about gratitude. If you've got a word which is what's it called when it's a palindrome. A palindrome you can read backwards and forwards. There's some meanings there's hints in that one. Like, I can't think of one off the top of my head. Or like the one which we spoke about in the lecture about gratitude, about David and Gog. David is Dalad Vav Dalad, Gog is Gimel Vav Gimel, which is not just a palindrome we're looking at. We're actually looking at the idea of the beginning and the end of a root word which is the same letter. So it represents, you start with a dalad, you go through the vav, and then to another dalad, so you're back at the beginning again. So you've got an iterative process. So the first dalad goes to the second dalad, which then, well, it's a dalad. The dalad starts the word, so it starts and goes on to another dalad. That's the idea of David, thinking I'm dull, I'm poor, I'm lacking everything, and everything's given to me as a present from God. And then when he receives it, he feels even more gratitude to God, feeling more indebted, right? Because he starts to realize how much God's really giving him. The more he realizes, the more humble he becomes, and that lifts him to a much deeper understanding of what God's given to him, and etc. The idea goes on and on. And with Gog, which is the enemy of David, the enemy of the Jewish people, the king at the end of days, which is going to fight with the Jewish people. Gog is Gimel Vav Gimel. Gimel is the opposite letter from Dalad. Gimel means giver, right? It means, or gaiva, if you mean arrogant, because the one who's the big guy, he's the one who gives to other. I'm the one who's got the power, and I'm the generous one. I'm giving to everyone, right? And then when he sees that everyone relies on him, he gets even more arrogant, and he feels himself as a giver and a source of reality for other people. Whereas David is feeling the opposite. He's feeling humbled because he realizes the real source of reality is God. So the more he has, the more he realizes he's being given more by God, not that he's self-generating. Anyway, that's the idea of remes. Remes just hints. There's a couple of nice ideas there. Then you have drosha. Drosha is exegesis. Exegesis means you're using certain tools where you can derive actual laws from the written text. So, and details of the laws. So this will be helpful if laws ever get forgotten. If you get some details of the laws get forgotten, you go back to the text, use one of the many methods, like comparing similar words, Gezerah Shova, Kavachomer, if you got a priori, I think, is that what it's called? I can't remember the fancy word. Most of you won't know what that means anyway. So it means Kavachomer means even more so. Yeah, that means if this law applies to this case, where it's quite a novelty applies there, so even more so it should apply to this case, right? I can give one off the top of my head, which isn't a real case because you don't even need to come on to this, but just to apply it. If a king, if a king commits a sin, he has to repent, right? Even though you would think maybe a king has got a certain liberty in what he can do. He can choose to kill someone if he's rebelling against him. If he just kills someone for no reason, he's liable to death penalty. So even more so, a regular person who doesn't have an excuse. That would be a crude example, right? So that applies many, probably thousands of different examples of that in the Talmud, right? Which is the body of oral law, which Jewish law is based on, right? So we've got all these different rules to derive, right? So we've got Pshat, which means literally lifshoit, to skin something, if you want to put it like that, or to open something up. It means the basic meaning. Remez means a hint, right? Drosha means to derive. That means you're like taking a spade and you're digging things up deep, right? And then you've got the fourth level, which is soid, which is secrets, right? Now, that's what Kaballah is. Kaballah is essentially the secrets of the Torah, okay? And they're also derived from the verses of the Torah, but it's looking at the verses of the Torah in such a radically different way. In fact, I'll give you a nice example, right? Just to bring example, the difference between Pshat, the basic meaning, and the fourth level of soid. The Vilna Gaon brings the idea of when a person does one of the commandments, they're literally living in the Garden of Eden at that moment. They might not feel it. We spoke about this about Dimensions of Time lecture, right? One of the first lectures we gave on the channel. But thank God we've got many more since then. A person's literally basking in the sublime pleasure of the world to come as you're doing the commandment now. It's just you don't feel it yet. God cuts that ability to experience it now to facilitate free will. So every time we do a commandment, we don't feel it's amazing, and we get addicted to it, and that will take away our free will effectively. But really, when we do the commandments, we're living. There's an aura of Gan Eden, of the Garden of Eden around us, and unfortunately, if a person does a sin, it does the opposite in terms of Gehenna, hell, right? Right. So we look at one of the verses. I think it's somewhere in Leviticus, right towards the end. I think you should do these commandments in the. V'chai bohem, you should live in bohem. You should literally v'chai and live bohem with them, right? I mean, you should live with the mitzvahs, and we learn from that. Should to live with the Torah, and then through exegesis even, we learn you should live with the Torah but not die for the Torah. That means if your life's in danger, you can break any law of the Torah with three exceptions: idolatry, interpersonal immorality, let's put it like that, right, like adultery and things like that, and murder. Those are three things you can't do even if your life's in danger. However, anything else you don't have to give up your life for. Okay. Now, that's all learned from V'chaim. You should live with the Torah, right, with the commandments, and not die. That's the implication. That's already, you're not reading the basic reading. You're saying, oh, you should live with them, but not what? But not die. That's called derivation. That's exegesis. That's Drash, the third level. The fourth level reads it like this. Yeah, you should do the commandments, vochai, and live bohem in them, right? Because the letter base can mean with, but most precisely it means in, right? Because you're with someone, in someone's even more with them, right? So vochai bohem, you live in the mitzvahs. That means when you're doing the mitzvahs, you're living literally inside the mitzvah. And remember, the mitzvah is our experience, is the physical way we get to experience God, right? Because we bring God into the physical world by doing the mitzvahs. We spoke about this before. The word mitzvah means connection, right? So when we do a commandment, a mitzvah, we're actually doing a connection with God, right? So we're living inside the mitzvah itself. It's a beautiful idea, beautiful. That's how Sod works. So it usually, all the problems you have when reading the basic meaning, you have to add a word in here, a couple of words in there, you have to explain something here to get the basic meaning, because things don't, when you translate things literally, like the first pasuk in Torah, Bereshis, I'll translate it, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'es. In the beginning of, he created, God, the heavens, the earth, right? Or definite article, the heavens, and the definite article, the earth. If you translate it absolutely literally, it's a struggle. We understand Bereshis in the beginning, bara Elokim, God created, it's not created God. God created es hashamayim, the heavens, v'es ha'aretz, and the earth, right? Well, we'll see. Hopefully, in one of the proof lectures, hopefully I'm working on, we'll show you the genius of the Torah, how actually you can understand that verse on 4 different levels. Yeah. I'll do it now for you if you want, right? Bereshis, the Pshat level, the basic level is, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The hint level, someone told me this idea, Bereshis, it means the beginning of what? Right? Rashi asks this question. Yes, it says, the beginning of everything. Before the beginning of everything, you should know one thing. God created the heavens and the earth. Now that you know God created the heavens and the earth, now it's worth listening to him. Okay, that's a hint sort of way of looking at it. Then you can look at it on the exegesis level, right? So we're looking at similar words here. Bereshis can mean in, rashis, the beginning of, but it can also refer to ber, with, or for the sake of, rashis, God created the heavens and the earth. And rashis is referred to, if you look in other places in the Tanakh, the word rashis can refer to the Jewish people, it can refer to the Torah. So really, the verse is saying, bereshis, for the sake of the Jewish people and for the sake of the Torah, God created the heavens and the earth, right? So that's using one of the tools of exegesis there, right? So Yisrael there is referring to essentially mankind, right? But because most of mankind rejected it, so the Jewish people have the purpose of creation. They're the ones who achieve the purpose of creation by keeping the Torah, right? And the non-Jews, we explained how their role is sort of like a symbiotic relationship with the Jews and the non-Jews. How the Jews are the actual ones who do the actual bringing down the spiritual, and the non-Jews create the physical world for the spiritual to rest in. So you combine the two, like a soul and a body, right? So that's the relationship between the Jews and the non-Jews, essentially. We bring the spiritual in, the non-Jews make the physical world a good place to live, a moral place where it makes sense to bring spirituality. You can't bring spirituality into a place which has got corruption in it. Okay. But essentially, but before Abraham, all of mankind, I can't remember which term it is. All of mankind had that name of Yisrael or Israel or Jew, roughly translated, even though it's Yehudi, whatever. That's the idea. But the idea is that God created the world for mankind to keep the Torah, because that brings, like we spoke out in the first of the Keystone lectures, the purpose of creation is for God to do good, and that can only be done through us doing good to our bodies and to the physical world and the world where evil resides, and we convert the evil into good. That's primarily by keeping the Torah and the commandments, where we're actually changing. In reality, we're changing the world. We're not just doing token actions. The mitzvahs, as we said, we're bringing down the world to come into this world. The Garden of Eden actually comes down here. Right? The presence of God comes into the world through the mitzvahs, and that's all done by the Jewish people. Okay, so that's the idea there. Bereshis b'shvil Yisrael, b'shvil the Jewish people, b'shvil Torah, for the Torah, which is the tool which the Jews use to bring God's good into the world. Now, that's all the level of Drash, because don't see anything. How on earth do you get to that from the word Bereshis in the beginning? You have to know there's a word Rashis, which means the beginning of, and the Jewish people are referred to the Rashis Tavosoi, the beginning, the first of God's crop, so to speak. Somewhere in the prophets, I can't remember off the top of my head where it is. It's in one of the Haftorahs. And the Torah is called Rashis Chochmah, right? I know where that is. That's in Psalms chapter 112, right? The last verse there. Rashis Chochmah Yiras Hashem. The beginning of knowledge is right? Is the fear of God, right? Rashis Chochmah. So the Torah is called Rashis, right? So and the base can be translated as in or with or for, right? Bishvil, for the sake of. Okay, so that's a third level. There's a fourth level though, right? Bereshis Borelokim, right? But with those first three meanings, you had to adapt the verses. You had to reread them somehow. Let's try reading that verse absolutely, literally as it's set out. Bereshis, Bore Elokim. God created Bereshis. We had just had the lecture on the 10 commandments and the 10 plagues. We just had a few weeks ago, right? With all the 10s correspond to each other. What was the very first? The 10 sayings God used to create the world. The very first one was Bereshis, right? God created Bereshis, a beginning of. He created the beginning of. That means He created time. He created that reality from which all of creation comes, right? That's the first point in time. Rashis means beginning of. Beginning of means beginning of something else, right? So you see that you're treating that verse literally, right? Or another way of reading Kabbalistic level, Bereshis with Rashis. Rashis is actually referring to one of the 10 attributes of God, which is one of the 10 Sephiras actually, right? On one level, it's the Sephira of Chokhmah, of wisdom, right? So God created the world with wisdom. Bereshis, with Rashis, with Chokhmah, as we said in that verse just now, Rashis Chokhmah, Yiras Hashem. Yeah, he created the world with Chokhmah. In fact, the Targum, one of the translations, the Aramaic translations, the Targum Yerushalmi, I think, says, right, that B'chukhmasa bara. Yeah, God created the world with Chokhmah. Because Chokhmah is that flash of reality of yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing. We'll speak about this hopefully in the lecture. Ooh, it's already got half an hour already, just for a quick introduction. Right, so we got something done already. Right, we've got the 4 levels of depths of the Torah. Right, you can understand the written Torah on 4 levels, based on different tools given to us in the oral Torah. Right, Pshat, basic reading, remez, hints, Drash, which is exegesis or derivations. It's learning things out through certain tools. And Sod is the secrets, but there you have to know the secrets of the Torah to start off with to make any sense of the verses on that level. And this is the most hidden level. Okay? Now, in terms of historically, the way that the oral Torah works, very briefly, I hope I can get through this. I want to get through to the nice Kaballah level and show some of the ideas there. Hopefully all of them in a very broad way. You have the oral Torah is what Moses taught us. Generally, it's what Moses taught us in the 40 years in the desert. And that consists of the explanation of the laws, right? The details of the laws, the thousands and millions of details in the laws in total, right? So you talk about putting on the phylacteries, it has to be square. The boxes which we put on, which scrolls have to be inside the boxes, what color the boxes, the straps have to be, other details. There has to be a yud on the made out of the strap on the arm, the strap of the tefillin of the head. There's a box which you put over here. Straps go around here. Then you've got straps which come down. Just got mine refurbished, so I'm pretty pleased about that. Feels very different now. The straps are a bit hard though now. You've got to break them in, I guess. Right, leather straps, right, which you wrap around our arm, coming from the box. Right, so you've got things like the yud, the letter yud, the smallest letter of the alphabet, one of 3 letters of God's names, which is made up of the 3 letters shin and daled and yud. So you've got the yud there, and you've got a shin on the side of 2 sides of the box. Both have a shin. Shin looks like this, 3-pronged letter, right? On one of the sides, of the left side, it actually becomes 4-pronged, which is very unusual because that's only with tefillin we see this idea, as far as I know. Yeah, there's Kabbalistic ideas there probably as well. So you've got a 3-letter, 3-pronged on the right side, and a 4-pronged on the left side of the tefillin. Got a shin there. That's all. That some of those details you can't derive them really from the text at all. It's just not there. Maybe a big genius you could work out. I don't know, right? But the idea is that certain things you just have to accept as part of the tradition, and if those get forgotten, you're in big trouble. Gezerah Shov is another example. There's a certain rule of deriving laws. Is if you've got 2 words can be completely different parts of the Torah, right? One could be in Exodus, one could be in Deuteronomy, but they're the same word, and there's a list of words which you're allowed to do this with, like lo me'ever, a famous one is lo. The laws of divorcing a woman, right, and the laws of setting a Eved Kanani is a type of servant. There's a couple of types of servants which a person is allowed to have according to biblical law, right? And if a person wants to set him free, you have to write a bill, a piece of paper, give it to him, right? How do we know that? Right? Because we learn from law from Isha. I think that's how it works. Isha. We also learn from there that a servant has to keep the commandments on the same level as a woman does, right? So there's certain things, and that's purely from the fact that it says the word lo, which means to her. Is that I could be getting confused. I don't know, sure. Yeah, I think it is, because the law over there is referring to a female maidservant, I think. Yeah. All right. Whatever it is. So you got lo. These two words, which are, if you just read through the text, you'll never put those two things together. But as part of our tradition, these two words are connected, and we learn a huge number of laws out by transferring laws which apply in one of the paragraphs or verses to this other one, right? So we learn laws from a woman to the laws of a servant, just based on the two words being the same. That you have to have an unbroken transmission for, because you can't just make up your own Gezerah Shabbos. Just because you've got a word here and a word there doesn't mean you can just put them together, right? It's only certain words which are singled out you can do that. Okay, so part of our tradition is things which you can't derive out from the texts. That's called halacha l'Moshe Messina. I think that's a small percentage of any of the laws which we have in Jewish law are derived in using things which we just have to accept as part of our tradition. Most of the stuff we can learn through Drash. That's the third level of the 4 levels of reading the Torah, of exegesis, where you can derive things using certain tools. The tools themselves you can't derive from the Torah. Maybe one of them you can. Okay, I'm not sure about that. Okay, but that's my own theory about one of them anyway. All right, okay, maybe not. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked here. But once you have these tools, these 13 tools to derive, or 32 tools, the 13 rules of Rabbi Yishmael, he summarizes them, or Rabbi Yossi Glili expands on them, he makes them into 32 rules, right? The question is, do they have that in their tradition themselves, or they're just like extrapolating on the tools they already have? But once you have those tools, you can look at a text, and if you're good enough, we really can't do it nowadays because we don't have that vast knowledge and ability to cross-reference things and analyze them on an accurate level without making a mistake, because you've got to thoroughly analyze it. So there's no other way of learning the exegesis. It has to be like this. It can't be this because of that. It can't be this because of that. It can't be that. And it could be so many reasons why you can't derive laws out in this way or that way, A, B, C. So it has to be D. This is the only way it works. And therefore we have now a new law which might have been forgotten, that we've re-established it through the power of exegesis. So most of the laws of the Torah can be learned from exegesis as well. Okay, and the Talmud goes through many laws, and it says, where do we know this from? Right? We know, as I said, it says this verse and it says that verse, and it can't mean this because we already know that from a different verse. So therefore, it must be telling us something which is an extension of the existing law. So it's telling us something extra, etc. Many different ways of deriving. You have to study the Talmud to fully appreciate this. Right. So that's what the oral Torah really is. It's a transmission of the laws and the tools to derive laws, whether they get forgotten or whether you want to clarify something which hasn't been explicit so far. Right? So if you give a crude example, let's say you've got a problem with the time zones, right? It used to be that, everyone knew today was Monday, right? So today's Monday, fine, very nice. But what if you're in Japan or Australia? They think it's Sunday or Tuesday. They think it's Tuesday because they're like 11 hours ahead of England. So what do you do then? How do you work it? So where do you draw the line? That's very important. You need to know Jewish law. You've got the Sabbath, and the Sabbath you can't do work on, right? You can't do light fires. You can't cook, carry, etc. carry outside the house. You have to do all the rituals of Shabbos, right? And on the Yom Tov, the festivals, you need to know what day it is, right? So how do you know that? And until recently, this law was never brought up because it was never relevant. So now we have to work out. So how do you work out? So we use these tools of exegesis or other tools which we have in our tradition, how to develop new ideas, new laws which were not explicit before. And this is essentially what the Mishnah is. The Mishnah is the main body of the core of the Oral Torah, is the Mishnah, where it's got all the laws of the Torah in it. It's 63 volumes, each one consisting of several chapters, each chapter several Mishnayos. The Mishnah is means literally repetition or saying something over, but it used to be oral law. Rabbi Yehuda Anossi, Rabbi Yehuda the prince, lived in around the year 180, something like that, in the mid 100s CE, during the Roman occupation of Jerusalem and Israel, right? They started to forget this oral Torah, right? And you can see that people were struggling to remember it. So he said, before it gets too bad, I'm going to collate all the teachings we have so far and put them into one place. So at least that'll be written down. Everyone, or at least you've got a structure where you can now discuss the details, right? Because to rely purely on our knowledge, our remembering the oral Torah, and only having the written Torah, that's not good enough. You have to have the written Torah. You have to have the oral Torah in some sort of tangible form, where you can say, right, okay, this Mishnah says this Mishnah says that. Then you can start deriving new laws from that. And that's what the Talmud records. The Talmud was written about 200 years after the Mishnah, 250 years after, around the year 350, 400. And that is all the discussions which happened after the Mishnah, where the rabbis argued about what the Mishnah means. So you see, already it's getting pretty bad. People just can't remember the basics of the Mishnah anymore, right? Getting the grey areas at least, right? Right? That's generally where arguments take place, right? For example, a very famous one, every child knows this. The first time you learn Talmud is Yi Shalom Adas. There's a rule. If a person loses an article, you have to return it, right? If it doesn't have any identifying marks on it, then you can essentially keep it because you don't know who to give it back to. However, what happens if there's another rule? The person has to give up on it. He has to give up hope first. That I lost my my wallet. Oh, it didn't have any name in it. Oh, I give up. And then a person who finds it is allowed to keep it. The question is, what happens if you don't know he's given up yet? Let's say it's an item where it's feasibly, he could have lost it and you'll only find out like a week later. Are you allowed to keep this item? There you go, an argument. That's a grey area. Yeah. Do you say that, well, if you know that when he finds out he's going to give up, and say, then you might as well keep it now. The other opinion says that this is how we actually paskin, which makes it quite complicated in finding lost articles, what you do with them. It's because of this opinion, which we actually follow. He says, no, it's not counted just because he was going to go up later. If he hasn't given up yet, and you don't know he's given up now, when you're about to pick it up, you can't take it, right? So, and the whole loads of laws come based on that. Right? So we're talking about, everyone agrees on the basics, but the question is, in this situation, which actually has a lot of applications practically, but in terms of the overall structure of the laws, it's actually a very small detail. Right? Or how much is the minimum amount of value to marry a woman? In Jewish law, you have to give a certain amount of value to a woman to marry her. There's a few different methods. One of them is giving her something of value. We give a ring. and that's definitely okay according to all opinions. However, what happens if you give her something which is a pruta but not a dinar? Right? This is a machalok, the argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. The house of Shammai, the house of Hillel, the first mission in Tractate Kedushin. Beis Hillel says if you give a pruta, which is essentially a penny, that's something of value, and the marriage works. And Beis Shammai says that no, you have to give a dinar. A dinar is more like a pound, right? Now, practically, if you try giving a penny or a pound to a woman to marry her, she'll probably give you no option of a divorce because she'll just refuse it in the first place, right? She says, "Forget it, I'm going," right? You cheeky man, trying to marry me with like a paper cup or something like that. That's pathetic, right? Right? So, but we need to know. We need to know the law, right? What happens if it does happen, right? And then there's applications which are not so unusual. Like, what happens if something did have value, right? And then it drastically lost its value, right? You can imagine that with shares nowadays. Yeah, you can have a share in a company which is worth £100, and then a few weeks later it's less than £1, right? Not that I'm saying you can. I don't know if you can actually marry someone with a share, but you get the idea. And what if it's worth more in another place? It's not worth that much here. Yeah, let's say you've got a diamond, but you're in South Africa, and diamonds, yeah, they're worthless. Let's say, yeah. Or if you go anywhere else, they're worth a lot of money. So does it work? So you got questions like that. Okay, so that's the Talmud. So basically, the structure of the Oral Torah is you've got the laws which were given to us from Moses directly, which you can't derive, and you've got the most of the laws which were given by Moses as well, but you could also derive them in case you forget them, right? And then you have grey areas which were never spoken about until the practical situation came up later. There's many cases in the Mishnah like that, and definitely in the Talmud you've got lots of cases like that. And in Jewish law today that happens a huge amount because you've got technologies changing everything, right? And then you have to know how to apply these sort of archaic laws to the modern situations. But the principles, if you understand the principles of those laws, you can apply them to the situations now. Yeah, so technically there's always a way of working out how to apply the Oral Torah, using the Oral Torah, how to apply the laws of the Torah to any situation using the tools of the Oral Torah. Now, the Kaballah is looking at the more esoteric side of the Torah, right? So it's not addressing what we have to do and what we can't do, right? It's talking about more about the philosophy of the Torah, right? Now, we already have an allusion to this in the Talmud. The Talmud is, as we said, we've got the laws, the basic laws are in the Mishnah. The Talmud are all the discussions and the rigorous analysis on different debates. Essentially, it's a collection of debates on how to understand certain Mishnahs, right? How does the Mishnah come up with this conclusion? What does it mean? What would be the case in this grey area? But the Talmud also has something called Aggadah. Aggadah are basically stories or cryptic statements or exegesis, right? Drashim or midrashim, we call them midrash, where you derive certain things from the verses, but the things you derive are not laws. They're sort of like random, trivial, something very strange. Interesting. Okay, thanks for telling me that, but you don't know what to do with it. This is called Aggadah. So you've got two parts to the Oral Torah. Broadly, you've got the laws, which is halacha, and Aggadah or Aggadah is the mystical part of the Torah. Right now, as opposed to the halacha, which tries to be as clear as possible, the Aggadah actually clothes things in a facade of imagery. right? So so many midrashim come up with these very ridiculous sounding situations. Like a person was walking, he saw a frog the size of 60 cities, crushed 60 cities. Then a snake came and ate the frog. I can't remember the exact details. Then a bird, which was big as 60 cities, it came and it picked up the snake and it laid an egg. It crushed 60 cities. I can't remember the details of that one, but I'm just giving you an idea of how ridiculous sounding these Aggadahs can be. The idea is, we're going to explain this now, right? Right, so basically these Aggadah, these stories or these critical imagery type pieces in the Talmud and in other books as well, we'll see, the Kabbalistic books also have this as well, are all trying to hide something deeper, but they don't want to tell you it explicitly. So what happens is they speak around it, they might hint to it, they might throw a keyword as, oh, you're speaking about a tree in that story. Oh, we know what trees really refer to. Must be the tree of knowledge or the tree of life, right? Ah, right, okay. Wink, wink, right? And you start to actually build up a picture of what it's really referring to. And one of the best books to do this is the Maharal. The Maharal is absolutely incredible. All his books are basically showing you how to take something which seems mundane or strange, and show that there's vast wisdom in these stories, right? Okay, so let's just carry on. So what is Kaballah then, right? So this Aggadah, again, Aggadah could be derived from the use of Midrash, or it could be this is part of our tradition passed down. And the Kabbalah is definitely the ideas in Kabbalah have been passed down from generation to generation, but only to a select few. That's the difference between the halakha and the Aggadah, because not everyone is capable of understanding the Kabbalah. It needs a certain level of intelligence and abstract thought. So we're going to go into that. So Kabbalah is essentially explaining what's going on behind the mask of creation. It essentially focuses on God and the creation, whether that be how God made the creation in the first place, including the physical world, which we're in now, which is right at the end of all the different stages of creation. We spoke about this in the Lashon HaKodesh, the Holy Tongue lecture, about the idea of the spiritual blueprint of the physical dimension. That is the Torah, essentially. The Torah is the spiritual blueprint of creation. But there's many more details to that, a vast number of details, and that's what Kabbalah is all about. Right? So whether it's the creation, the physical or the spiritual side, the supernatural dimensions, right? And the Kabbalah also speaks about what the purpose of creation is. And that's basically what this channel is geared towards, right? What's the purpose of everything? What's God trying to do? What's the idea behind everything? Right? And this can all be portrayed in a general sense, or you can go into a very detailed level, right? So today we're going to try speaking on the general level to give you an overview of the whole of the Kabbalah, the essentials of Kabbalah. But be aware, there's a vast number of details in these things as well. Okay. So if we want to look at the comprehensive, so I just want to add one thing in before I forget, is when we're speaking about the oral and the written Torah, just finish that off. That says the oral Torah contains the Kabbalah as well, right? I forgot to mention this earlier. I'll do it now quickly. If you think about the written and oral Torah, the written Torah you think of as something static, whereas the oral Torah is something which is alive, right? And it's connected with us, like we spoke about in the Purim lecture, right? It's that part of the Torah which is expressed through human beings, right? That's why it's oral, it's spoken. Something which is written, it's outside of the person. Something spoken is an interpersonal, intrapersonal reality, right? And the idea is that God doesn't just want the Torah to be an abstract thing up here. He wants us to be transformed by the Torah, and when we get transformed by the essence of the Torah, we are able to speak out and create new ideas coming from the Torah using these four methods. That's the idea of humans learning Torah. It's a beautiful idea. If you think about it, if you've got a powerful light source like the sun or a powerful light bulb, right? So the light is very nondescript. It's very fixed. It's got its own properties, and it just stays as it is, basically. That's what the written Torah is. It's just, you've got these letters in this combination, and that's what the written Torah is. It doesn't change at all. There's no movement. There's no... Think back to parallels here to the nature of God we spoke about in the second Keystone lecture. You see parallels there. Maybe we'll touch on them in this lecture because it actually does come into this. That's how the Torah is, right? The light source, the energy. The written Torah is that light energy source. How it's expressed depends on different filters or different lenses which you put around that light, right? So if you want to bring a nice lilac hue to the room you're in, so you put a lilac filter there, right? If you want to have a nice picture, like a translucent picture, so you make it in a certain way with different colors, hold it up to the light, and then you see a beautiful picture. But that's really an expression of the light. But it's one way you can express the light. You can express the light with countless different things, right? But ultimately, they're all an expression of light itself. Yeah? Okay? Think of light being a potential energy, right? And how you use light as being a manifestation of that light, or crystallization of that that entity being light. Like me looking at my face, the expression of light, right? Because my face doesn't look like anything intrinsically, but because of the nature of my face, when light shines in it, it becomes visible and it has a certain structure and certain, good lookingness to it. Yeah, so there you go. I like to speak about how good they look, right? Just to thank God, right? That's the idea. You see this parallel. We're going to see that in Kabbalah we have this idea. We spoke about fractals before. About which lecture was that? Is that the one about the fifth dimension? Might have mentioned it there. I think we mentioned it about the nature of evil. Yeah, maybe that one. Right? We spoke about fractals then, about how patterns repeat themselves. If you have a certain pattern at the root, you'll see that pattern repeating everywhere. Right? So you've got the idea of God himself, which is unchanging, and the way God reveals himself to us, which we perceive, again, that's a human element, we perceive in different ways, right? Just like the Torah, the written Torah is, and the oral Torah is our perception of it, right? How we interpret it, how we even read it, right? Remember, there's no vowels, there's no punctuation, right? So as soon as you try understanding something from the written Torah, that is the oral Torah, essentially. But that can be done, as we said, on many different levels. So now the deepest level you can do this is the Kabbalistic level. Like we said, it's basically saying what God did to create the world, why he did it, how you can see from what he did, how that achieves his purpose of creating the world. And we're going to have a look at the broad ideas now. Now, before we get started, it's almost an hour already, right? We maybe we'll make this the introduction to the introduction of Kabbalah, right? Call this maybe the Oral Torah, an introduction to Kabbalah, and finish off another time. Okay, we're going to see that. I don't like these lectures which go on for 2 hours. I guess I feel that puts people off. All right, so we'll see that most of the ideas we already know when we're talking about why God creates the world. We've spoken about this at length through many lectures already. And we've also touched on many ideas of what God actually does, about different dimensions, time, fifth dimension, right? God's attributes, his characteristics. Video, for some reason, one of the best ones I've given, and it's not that long, but yet not that many people have heard it. The 3 channels, the 3 paths which God uses to run the world: kindness, justice, and mercy, or truth, balance. Okay, so before we actually get started, there's one other fundamental difference between Kabbalah and the other parts of the Torah. Okay? Everything in the Torah, besides the Kabbalistic level, maybe the Aggadah level as well. Aggadah is just the stories. The Kabbalah are the stories which, or the passages which refer directly to the hidden parts of the Torah, and they're meant to be. According to the Ramchal, all Aggadah is meant to be understood on the Kabbalistic level, so it's a bit of a grey area. It's a difference between Aggadah and Kabbalah. Kabbalah usually is referred to what we understand as the secrets of the Torah. Aggadah are the stories which you can interpret on that deeper level. Aggadah literally means stories. Kabbalah means to receive, because that's a part of the Torah where you need to receive that from your teacher, otherwise you just can't do it, right? The ways to derive from the verses, everything, the ideas are too profound and too abstract. You can't just do it yourself. It's impossible. You need to have a teacher to do it. Once you've got the keys, then you can start building on that to enhance the ideas. That you can do, right? But making new connections between pre-existing ideas, but you can't come up with completely new ideas in Kabbalah. Everything's just an expansion of the core which we already know. Okay, it's just you're getting a deeper awareness of the ideas, seeing deeper nuances. That's what. If you want to study Kabbalah in a way where you're innovating new ideas, that's what you have to do. You can't make up new ideas. It has to be based on the ideas we already have. It's a very, very delicate structure. So the idea is that with all the other aspects of the Torah, or the halacha, the legal part of the Torah, the ideas of the Torah can always be brought down and closed in a physical facade, let's say. So, for example, there's a law in the Bava Kama, one of the tractates which deals with damages. Right? A cow gores, a bull gores a cow, to be precise here, and you see a stillborn calf next to the cow, right? Does the owner of the bull have to pay for the calf as well? Because we're not sure. Was the stillbirth a direct result of the bull attacking the cow while it was still pregnant, and now the calf's out, it was dead on getting hit by the bull? Or maybe the cow just gave birth first. It just happened to be a stillbirth, and now you see the bull hits the cow now. So maybe it only hit the cow. It had nothing to do with the stillbirth. So it only has to pay for damages to the cow, but not to the cow's calf. Right? So the discussion about that. So according to one opinion, you're not sure. So let's say the calf costs £100, pay £50. The other opinion, this is the one we go by, he said, no, you can't force someone to pay something if you're not even sure he has to pay. If he's the one with the money now, right? You can't extract anything from him unless you've got proof. That's a very, very fundamental law in all of financial law in the Torah. Yeah, you have to bring a proof, right? If you want to take money from someone else, right? Otherwise, we leave it by the default. The person who has his money, you can't take it away from them. Now, you see what we're doing here? What we did there, without realizing, we took a physical situation and made it abstract. So we're thinking about, account, and this is what how law works, even in civil law and non-Jewish law. This is how it works. You've got a case, someone did something to someone else. Do they have to pay? Well, you have to analyze it. What are they doing, right? So in this case, you've got someone who damages someone. So that's the concept of damages. So you go into your data bank, right? Laws of damages. But then now you have to bring into it the idea of sveikos, the idea of doubt. And then you have to have the rule. To have the ideas, the abstract concepts that someone has the rights to their money. You can't infringe on those rights unless you've got a definite demonstrable reason to extract that money, right? So if you had two witnesses which saw it, let's go back to the physical. For example, in the physical world, if there happened to be two people who saw it, so that's a concept of proof. That's an acceptable proof which can be applied to this situation, which means that you can extract money with that level of proof. Okay, so basically we're mixing up physical events, I guess you would say, on physical objects and narratives with abstract concepts, and we try to abstractify the physical case to something where, right, okay, so it boils down to these three laws. What's the interplay between them? How do they interact? So he doesn't have to pay. Okay. That's how the first three levels work. Pshat, Remez, Drash, right? The basic translation or understanding of the Torah. Remez, hints. Drash, exegesis. That's already getting a bit more abstract, right? But they always refer to laws which apply to physical entities. Always, right? Even the most abstract laws, the laws of the Tuma and Tahara, purity and impurity, right? This is a very, very abstract metaphysical concept. Something can be pure and something which is impure. A person who's impure cannot go into the holy temple, for example, right? Right? But there, you've got an application, at least, going to the temple. The temple is a physical place, right? And how does a person become impure? Well, there has to be a person, that's physical, and then purity was endowed upon him, was given to him by touching a dead animal, let's say. Yeah? A dead animal's got the ability to make a person impure, right? So you have to know the dead animal is a person, and therefore he cannot go walking into the temple. So we're always dealing with physical things. Now, when we talk about Kaballah, this is the only part of the Torah where there's no physical hook to grasp the concepts at all. You're working on the pure concept level. Those mathematicians out there, right? This would be very comparable to pure mathematics and applied mathematics, like mechanics, right? Applied mathematics would be, you've got a ball rolling down the hill, it's got a certain friction, whatever, and how much speed does it have, and if you hit something at the bottom, what will happen, right? That's applying ideas. Pure mathematics is just what you do with this number, this function, this operation, right? This set. These are all abstract ideas, but you work on the abstract level. You don't have to make it physical. Like if I ask someone now, right, hopefully, what's 3 times 3 is 9. You ask that to a child, so you have to explain what's 3 times 3. 3 times, what does that mean? Let's say you got 3 apples, right, in a bag, and you got 3 bags. Okay, so count that 3, 3, 3. Oh, 3 times 3, I know it's like 3 lots of 3 apples is 9. So you're applying it to a physical situation, whereas in pure mathematics you don't bother with qualifiers or whatever things, physical attachments to the ideas. You try focus just on the ideas, right? Calculus, maybe not geometry so much, geometry to an extent, algebra, right? Things which are just purely on the conceptual level, and you can work with those ideas. That's what Kabbalah is. You're working with abstract ideas without the need to go down to the physical level. However, it's not just like pure mathematics, because you're dealing with something very dangerous if you get it wrong. We're talking about things which are getting close to God. Now, if you get something wrong there, that can end up having a wrong idea about God, and that's heresy or idolatry or whatever it ends up being. So therefore, it's only suitable to be learnt by people who have already got the ability to think on an abstract level. Someone who can deal with pure concepts without having to bring it down to the physical. Because you do that in Kabbalah, you can end up with terrible mistakes, like thinking God's made up of 10 parts. You start to, the 10 sephiros, these are God's attributes, and then you think, I've got attributes. Human beings have attributes, right? Human beings have arms, or if you're a bit more refined than that, human beings have character traits. I've got kindness, I've got justice, anger, truth, a sense of truth, sense of purpose, wisdom, right? I think, right, so God's like that as well. So he's made up of all these bits as well, which we know is wrong. God transcends all concepts. So therefore you have to understand, we're talking about the way God reveals himself to us. These are lenses through us to communicate and to perceive God, like the light coming off a person's face, which we've spoken about many times. Yeah, you're not looking at the person, you're looking at the light, right? The face itself, you don't know what it actually is, but it does something to the light where it can create and engender some sort of sense of connection and real relationship with the thing where the light is emanating from, right? Right? Now remember, we spoke about in the lecture about why people think God is physical. Because there's a tendency of most people, when they're thinking about anything, to think about it in terms of primarily using the imagination part of their mind, right? And the abstract part of the mind is only being secondary to it, or less real, yeah? So when people think that God is really real, that means he must be very big and physical, right? For these people, it's very risky to study Kabbalah, because we have to necessarily use words which are physical words. That's the problem. But when we say these physical words, yeah, we're just using them as a parallel to understand concepts. Because you can't speak about anything without using words. Words always have meanings. Meanings can always also have expressions in physical, right? Speak about God's sense of justice, right? Or kindness. But you can think of people who are kind. You can think of kindness, a very vivid picture of a person giving someone charity or something like that, right? These imagination orientated people will necessarily bring things into the physical level and mess things up. That's why I think this is the warning, or the main qualification we're given through in our tradition to study Kabbalah is someone who's boki b'shas poiskim, or mile kresa bosov lechem bosa, right? He's filled himself up literally with bread and meat. Bread and meat referring to an allusion to Shas, which means the Talmud, means the core of Jewish law, of the oral law, and poskim, which means the actual practical application of the Talmud in the Jewish law. So the Talmud and Shulchan Aruch, which would be Jewish law. So once you're an expert in that, then you've already developed the tools to be able to take something physical and think about it on the abstract level. Therefore, okay, right, so you're probably going to be much safer when you learn Kabbalah because you understand how to think of things on the abstract level, right? Right? What makes me laugh this when we try explaining certain laws to certain groups of people. I'm going to get in trouble with this now. Certain groups of people, right? They might not be male, put it like that, right? Right? And they hear what you're learning. Yeah, they hear this law. That's interesting. The laws of blessings, and then we speak about the laws of intimacy, right? Now, this might seem strange to most people. When we speak about the laws of intimacy in Torah, we're not thinking on the physical level at all. We're thinking about this, right? Is this permitted? Is that appropriate there, right? And what happens? How does the law change if this happens to the woman, a newlywed woman, right? And she has certain. I'm not going to go into details in the forum here, but yeah, you get very, very, very detailed in very unpleasant sort of subjects. Put it like this, right? But when we study them, we got teenagers or young teenagers studying these things in the Talmud, and we're not thinking about practically. Yeah, we have a quick picture about what the basic case is, and we're trying to analyze what's the idea here, right? So the idea of marriage, the idea of a woman being faithful or not, right? Right? If a woman's not faithful, are we sure she's not faithful? What indications do we have she's not faithful, right? Are there witnesses, whatever? Witnesses for what aspect, right? The woman seclude herself. Was there something more explicit witnessed, right? And we're thinking about that, right? And we're thinking about all this, and we're going into, and we have people shouting, saying, "No, I think," and we're using all these words. A person would think, "What are you doing? You're crazy," speaking about these things, right? But we're just on another level. We're on the level of the abstract. It's not occurring to us like, "Ooh, it's fun to speak about this," right? All right, maybe some people who are not really into the learning aspect of it might unfortunately fall into that trap. But when we're studying things, it's meant to be on the abstract level. So if a person's really an expert who's mastered the Talmud and Jewish law, right, he looks at everything in a much more abstract way. You've developed that part of your mind which deals with abstraction to such an extent you can start learning about God himself and understand that we're never really talking about God. We're talking about God's expressions and things like that because God himself is beyond concept. So to understand that concept itself needs a very high level of abstraction. Yeah. But the truth is, it's not all or nothing. There's a sliding scale, right? The more abstract the person's mind becomes, and the deeper you can delve into the depths of the Kabbalistic ideas. That's really how it works. So you've got a child who everything is physical. You can't teach them Kabbalah. You can teach them there's a God. God created us, right? So think of a big man in the sky who created. Okay, that's a good for a start. To start things off, you've got to know there's a creator. Fine, what can you do, right? As it gets more mature, you say, yeah, you can't see him, right? He's actually here with us now, but you can't see him. Oh wow, he's invisible, right? Is he hiding or whatever? They start developing abstract ideas. Oh, you can't see him, right? Something's here, but you can't see. And then you develop. The older you get, the more mature you get, the more you'll be able to think of things on the abstract level. To frame this in a succinct way, this idea of the sliding scale, the beautiful Nefesh HaChaim. Nefesh HaChaim is written by Rav Chaim Volozhin, who is the pupil of the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah from Vilna, who lived in the mid-1700s. We've spoken about him before many times. Absolute genius, one of the greatest scholars who's ever lived. At least in his generation, he was like few rabbis who were just like head and shoulders above anything you can imagine. Incredible mind, right? He's the one who knew the whole of the written law by the age of 3, right? For example, he was asked, give me a verse which has got 5 words in a row, consisting of only 2 letters each one. So it's 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And he said, I can tell you 3 verses like that. And immediately he answered that. So he talked about someone who's a very spiritual, holy person, whose mind was just like a genius would be an insult to call him. It was way beyond that, right? So anyway, so his teachings on Kaballah, a lot of them were written down in this Sefer Nefesh HaChaim. Now, they go into the Mishnah in Avos, right, in the Tractate of Avos, which is the only tractate of the Mishnah which deals directly with the spiritual aspects of the Torah, primarily with the Midas, with the character traits, and Jewish philosophy. Therefore, the commentaries who like to go into the Kabbalistic side of things, if they ever explain the Mishnah, it will be Tractate Avos. As we know, the Maharal, like we mentioned before, he's got a whole big set, a work on explaining the Tractate of Avos. Avos meaning fathers, because fathers, we get things from our fathers' tradition. It starts off Torah, Moshe Kibbutz Torah Messiah, and Moshe got the Torah from Sinai. Then and the whole line of transmission we spoke about in the either the Purim or the Chanukah lecture we gave this year. Okay, so the Mishnah says, it's chapter 2, Mishnah number 10. Right, so chapter 2, Mishnah 10, Rabbi Eliezer, the 5 pupils of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yochanan son of Zakkai. He had 5 pupils, 5 primary pupils, and now we're going through, each one of them had 3 sayings. Right, so this is the one of Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Rabbi Eliezer, one of the 2 teachers of Rabbi Akiva, the famous Rabbi Akiva, probably the greatest sage who's ever lived, right? He says, as part of what he says, it is having mischamim keneged urun shel chachamim vevezoher begechalton shelo. You should warm yourself by the fire of the sages, but be careful from the coals that you don't burn yourself. So you can imagine a person sitting by a fire, coal fire. He warms himself by the fire. Oh, we're getting warm up, we're getting energy from it, but don't get too close because you might burn yourself. So he explains like this. This is referring to how to study Kaballah. That's how he interprets this Mishnah, right? Warm yourself by the words of the Chacham. Chacham means wise people. So we talk about wisdom here. Chachma, wisdom, as opposed to someone who knows law. Wisdom is usually referring to something more abstract. Maybe that's where he gets it from this. Anyway, but what he says is that when learning Kaballah, try getting as close as you can. Warm yourself up. Get closer to your knowledge of Hashem, of God. But be very careful. If you get too close, you might get burnt. So don't get too close that you burn yourself. So this is a nice rule of thumb of how deep one can go into these things. Right? Get closer to the knowledge by delving deeper, pushing yourself to think and use your abstract mind. Keep making sure you're going deeper into the ideas. Make sure you're thinking of it abstract. If you go too deep, though, it gets too hard and you get burnt. Why? What's going to happen? If you go too deep into certain Kabbalistic ideas, they're too hard for the mind to hold the abstract thought, and naturally the body will have to run, and if he wants to hold on to that idea, we'll have to create an image just to ground it somehow. So if you recognize in yourself that you're starting to slip, oh, okay, stop, refocus yourself, recalibrate, right? Internalize all that work, the progress you've made until then, make it part of yourself. So now the next time, it won't be like you reached here and then you pushed yourself to reach there. It'll be, I reached there, but it's now inside my head. Yeah, it's easy now. And I push myself to there. Now you can push yourself even further, right? Because you've internalized some of the ideas. So what was outside of you before, very deep Kabbalistic idea this, something which was outside of you before now becomes inside. So now you have access to the next level where you can go outside of yourself and reach even further, right? Imagine you're climbing up a mountain, right? You can't see the top of the mountain. You can't even see the next peak. If you climb up high enough, right? I might not be at the next peak now, but at least I can see it. It's outside of me, but at least it's within my range. But the peak beyond that, still not. Once you climb up to the next peak, then the peak before is like, oh, that's easy now. Yeah, I've passed that a long time ago. The one which you're at now, so, oh, this, I didn't even imagine that this even existed before, and now I'm here, and now that I can see something else which I never even could imagine exists. And then you start pushing yourself higher and higher and higher, right? But it only works through working on yourself, internalizing ideas, getting used to the abstract ideas, and then going to a deeper level. That's how you... And if you feel yourself that you've jumped too many steps, or you've gone too high in one go, then come back. Don't burn yourself. Don't start making serious mistakes. And start what's it called? Making the ideas into too physical. Okay. In fact, the Vilna Gaon, we see a story from a Batatz's story, amazing story, quite scary. Rav Chaim Volozhin, this is the one who wrote the Nefesh HaChaim, was asking his teacher, the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Eliyahu from Vilna. He asked him, "You're such a holy man." I'm not sure he said it like this, but you get the idea. You're such a holy man. You're known as the righteous one. He wasn't known so much as a genius. He was called the Vilna Gaon, but he was known as the Chassid of Vilna, the righteous one from Vilna, because his righteousness was even higher than his wisdom. I said, what is your Yetzer Hara? Right, we've all got like our desires, our evil inclination. Yeah, you want to look at something not appropriate, you want to say something not appropriate. They recognize the Vilna Gaon is way beyond this, yeah? Right? We know the Vilna Gaon, every Erev Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, where he's trying to work out all the bad things he had to repent on, yeah? He basically added up the number of minutes he wasted, the number of either seconds or minutes. It was something crazy, basically, and that for him, that was a terrible thing, right? So that sounds like a person who just doesn't have a draw to anything negative at all, right? So he asked him, "Come on, what was your Yetzer Hara? What's your evil inclination for?" Right? I mean, I wish I had what your evil inclination is for you is probably an act of righteousness for me. It's probably a mitzvah for me, right? So the Vilna Gaon, surprised, he said, "No, you don't want to know." Right? And he pushed it. He said, "You really don't want to know. It's really bad." Right? And he pushed it, "Come on, please. It's Torah. I need to learn. I need to understand." Right? To get a framework of how things work. Whatever. And he said, "Fine, I'll tell you." Right? The Mishnah in Chagiga, which speaks, is the second chapter in Tractate Chagiga, is the one which deals with Kaballah. Interesting. It's the most Kabbalistic of all the chapters. It's a very short tractate. It's only 3 chapters. I think the second one is the Derivation. Right? It says you can learn the Masa Merkava. We'll speak about it in the next lecture. This about the Masa Merkava and the Masa Bereshis. There's only one person or two people or even zero. You can't even teach it directly. You have to give hints, and the student has to understand himself what you mean without speaking things out. I'd be a very bad teacher of this because I speak everything out, which might be a problem. Right, okay, well, I have to think about that one. Anyway, so it says in that Mishnah, there's four things you must not think about. What is above, what is below, what is before, and what is after. So we're talking about things which are outside of our dimension, before time, above all the worlds. It's about the realm of God, right? So when Rav Chaim Volozhin heard that, how do you think he'd react? If this is the Yetzer Hara, this is the negative drive, the test in his life of the Vilna Gaon. Yeah, he's got the desire to know beyond. So the Chaim Volozhin should be jumping and saying, "Wow, incredible! I'd love to have that Yetzer Hara. You've got such a love for God and love for knowledge of God. That's where the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination attacks you. He tries to push you too far." He didn't say that. The Chaim Volozhin, when he heard that, he was silent. He realized how serious that was. He realized that is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination for Avodah Zarah itself, for idolatry. And we know, we spoke about in the Hanukkah lecture, that this was removed, this natural urge for idolatry was removed from mankind. Right? A person can bring it back by just being evil, right? But he realized that the Vilna Gaon, through his love of God, had got to such a high level, he reawakened that Yetzer Hara, right? Because that Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Hara means evil inclination, right? It's a shorthand for a lust for something negative, right? Could be for food, could be for gossip, whatever, right? But his negative lust was to know God too much. Now, when you want to know God so much, right, you don't want to stop and pull back when you get high enough. And that means you're going here, but then you're going here, and then here, and then here, and then I can't stop, right? And eventually, even someone like the Vilna Gaon is going to hit a point where it's way too abstract even for him. Because remember, we're talking about levels which are ultimately infinite levels. So eventually he'll run out of steam, and there'll be something so abstract, he'll have to put something in a tiny way, some sort of imagery on it. That is idolatry. Because then he's thinking about God himself. Oh, but it's not really God. Putting some sort of level of tangibility on these ideas. And that's the danger of Avodah Zarah. Idolatry is basically, you're looking at God's ways of communicating the world and understanding that God is them. God is the light which comes from the face, in my metaphor, right? So this is what he's saying in this Mishnah. He's warning people about what he himself struggled with. Yeah? Go as far as you can, warm yourself to this knowledge, but careful, don't burn yourself. So it's really important when learning Kabbalah to have this, besides the foundational ideas, but to always be aware of the foundational ideas, not to make mistakes when you get too far in, not to take things which have to be understood on the abstract level and don't make it physical at all. Okay? And this is a very profound idea now. Why Kabbalah and even parts of Aggadah, right, are described in such vivid and visceral terms. The imagery is immense in these stories, right? On the contrary, they don't shy away from imagery. They try slamming it in your face, making the most ridiculous, colorful, what's the word? Blunt stories and imagery which you can think of. right? The story about the big frog and the big bird and the snake. It's a frog, and it picks up this thing, it lays an egg, it crushes 60 cities, right? And wow, incredible stories these are. Wow, so interesting. I love Aggadah. These stories are so much fun to read, right? Why are they written in such a way? Sometimes they're absurd, right? The book of the Maharal, Kabbalah, goes through 7 categories of Aggadah, which all have their own problems with them, and he's trying to explain what's really going on. One of them is just ones which seem, all right, that's a bit whatever. Some of them seem, this is absurd, like there's one which says that based on the Drash, exegesis from one of the verses, it says that Adam, right, before he was married to Eve, he went and had a relationship, an intimate relationship with every animal. He came on, literally, he came on every animal, right, in existence, and he was only satisfied when he came on his wife Eve. Now, what on earth does that mean? That's disgusting, right? And what does it mean? Every single animal? Did he have enough time? It was only a few hours until he was created, and then he was able to have Eve as a separate being, right? So what's going on? What's all this about? Yeah, so he's understanding. So there's very, very, very deep ideas in this, right? Doesn't mean he physically went and had a relationship, right? It means he was trying to find the place where it essentially boils down to the idea of Adam naming the animals. That's what it comes down to. I can't remember how he gets through the whole thing, right? The idea of Bo means the idea of dominator. It means he was standing on all the animals. That means standing on the roots of the animals, right? Right? And he only found something. Maybe I can't remember all the details. He only found that source, that spiritual energy, which spoke to him in the form of his wife Eve, right? But he brought the names down, right? He brought the name down, right? I am Shredded. I'm dominating over this because I'm bringing its name down into this animal. I'm connecting the animal with its name. So just things like that, right? Sometimes it can be even heretical, right? Like the story of a rabbi who went to the high priest, went into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. The one day of the year he's allowed to do that. He has to do that. And he saw what seems to, if you read literally this piece of Galata, he saw God sitting on the chair. What earth does that mean? God's not physical. And God says, please give me a blessing. That's heretical if you read it literally. So the Maharal again explains exactly what it's talking about. We're not talking about God himself, we're talking about certain aspects of God's, some of the Sephiros, some of these midas, some of these lenses which Hashem relates to the world. We're speaking about those things in sort of a more of a metaphorical way, right? So like if I'm speaking to you, like speaking to your anger, right? So you can imagine, like, if you want to do that in a cartoon, you like show yourself getting angry, and like you can imagine a fire starting to burn on the inside, and it starts to show on the outside. Like your skin becomes transparent, and the fire jumps out, and then you're speaking with this fire. Oh, why are you so angry? Because right. So it's sort of a way of bringing out ideas. But using physical imagery to bring out the ideas. But because the ideas are so distracting, most people will read it as a funny story, very enjoyable, right? You can even bring a collection of Aggadah books, right, in English bestseller. Wow, fantastic stories here, yeah. Oh, I love the one about the demon which was juggling the cups of wine and didn't spill a drop. Right, or the big bird which laid an egg on a massive city, whatever, right? So why do they do it like that? It's because they know everyone needs to know the halacha. When it comes to halacha, Jewish law, everyone has to know it. So that has to be clear. But when it comes to the hidden parts of the Torah, not everyone can do that because they don't have the abstract mind. So we want a way to filter out those people who should not be learning the Kabbalah. So what do the rabbis do? They clothe it in a very nice story, which a little child will appreciate. And when a person's been studying the hard parts of the Talmud, and it's very complicated, the laws and everything, oh, we got some Aggadah, let's have some stories. Yeah? So those people, they're not meant to understand what's really going on, right? But for those people, they have a nice, good laugh and enjoy themselves, right? They might get an inkling there's something deeper there, but okay, nothing we could do there, Jeff. This is my favorite Aggadah, the story of XYZ, right? Or they just don't realize they skipped over one of the secrets of the universe, right? One of the most profound, deep ideas that would change their life if they were capable of understanding that it's lying here. Whereas the abstract mind, someone who's really developed his mind well enough, he sees a Aggadah and he says, there's no way that what the rabbis are telling me in this story is meant to be taken literally. What's really going on here? Let's get a Maharal. See one way of understanding. Look at the Ramchal. Yeah? Try finding some of the other commentaries which bring out the deeper ideas. Okay? So using the tools and keys which a person has as part of our tradition, and thankfully I've learned a lot of these from my teachers, you're able to uncover these ideas of the Aggadah and even Kabbalah and understand what's really going on. I had one recently. What was it? Beautiful idea. Yeah, I think we said. It's connected with one of the Passover lectures. Yeah. Okay, this is getting into details already here. I don't want to get so much, but just as an example I had recently. It says in the Haggadah, same word as Aggadah, means telling over. The Haggadah is the book we use on the night of the Passover Seder, where we go through the retelling of the going out of Egypt and all the miracles there. And the smiting of the firstborn, it says, God says, I will go into the midst of Egypt and kill all the firstborn Egyptians, right? And it says there, the Haggadah says, what does it mean I will go? Me and not an angel, not a seraph, which is a higher angel, me and not a messenger. Me means me and not anyone else. Okay, fine. Because me implies me and not someone else. Fine. That would be exegesis level of understanding. But there's a soid level of understanding. There's a Kabbalistic level of understanding. In Kabbalah, there's different levels of how do you put this? There's the idea of the personal pronouns. The personal pronouns are like I, you, him, right? So there's actually 5 when relating to God, right? We've got nothingness, something which is beyond our perception, something, or it, right? Then him, that's a bit more personal. Then you, that means a relationship already, direct relationship. And then I is where God is so immanent that you don't even experience yourself anymore. That, as we say, I am the Lord your God, right? God, right? Things like that. If I am here, everyone is here, as Hillel said, right? What do you mean I? He didn't mean him. What was me? I, the I of everything. The big me, which is God, right? So these are all different, are called personal pronouns, right? I, you, him, it, nothing, right? So the one for I refers to, if you remember the 10 Sephiros, 10 plagues lecture, which we gave recently. If you look on the chart there, you see the last of the 10 Sephiros is Malchus, which is kingship, which also refers to God's divine presence. It's the lowest one, which means it's the one closest to us. This is also referred to in Kabbalah as I, right? So the Haggadah says there was in the Makas Bechoros, at the killing of the firstborn, there was Gilu Shechina, right? There was revelation of God's divine presence. How do you get that? Because God's divine presence, it's broadly speaking about how God reveals himself. That means God was, showed himself, so to speak, right? As he killed them, right? And me and not someone else, right? But on the deeper Kabbalistic level, the word ani is referring specifically to Malchus, or to the Shekhinah. So when it says ani in the verse, in the written Torah, right? This is in chapter 11, in Exodus, chapter 11, 12, somewhere like that. Right? Chapter 11. Right? Yeah, I think it's chapter 11, towards the end of that chapter. Ani Yatzeh B'Sech Mitzrayim. This is to do with Pharaoh's, Moses' warning to Pharaoh that God was going to kill the firstborn children of the Egyptians, and he says, Ani Yatzeh B'Sech Mitzrayim. I will go in Egypt. So on the Kabbalistic level, it's saying Ani, that means God's Shekhinah, that specific aspect of God's revelation will go into Mitzrayim. Now you see the Haggadah, which speaks, it sounds like it's being not too pedantic. It says, God's going to reveal himself, the Shekhinah, right? No, it means specifically the Shekhinah. It means that aspect of God, which is the lowest aspect of God, which we have access to. That means the thing which is closest to us. We think of all the aspects of God are deeper and deeper and further away from us. The one which is the most imminent is the Ani. I will go out, right? That's the Shekhinah, right? Or God being the king. The king is the one who has that relationship with his people, right? That's why it's Malchus as well. Okay. So let's wrap up now. Yeah, I was right. We wouldn't have time to actually go through the details. So this is just going to be introduction to Kabbalah as the comment which asked me to do. So being faithful to that comment now. He didn't ask me to teach Kabbalah, just the introduction. This is the introduction. This is the precursor to starting to learn Kabbalah. You have to have the right frame of mind. Okay. So using these tools, for example, I just used one of the tools there, knowing the personal pronoun system in relation to God, right? And the different levels of how he reveals himself. He reveals himself as nothingness, as something which is beyond, as something, as him, like something which we're aware of in a personal, but it's outside of us, right? You, someone with a direct relationship to us, the closeness, and I, where we start to God, we have such a high deep recognition of God's immanence that we lose ourselves, and it's just I'm just God, because there's no I, so all there is God, right? Okay, so a person who's got that abstract way of thinking, he'll see these casual words and lights will go off in his head. Now, you can see this in the works of the Maharal so much. It's just beautiful. If you really want to appreciate the abstract side of the Torah, you have to learn Maharal. Ramchal does things differently, but Maharal is, if you want the juicy sort of like more detailed parts, the Maharal seems to be focusing on that much more predominantly than Ramchal does. The Ramchal also does, but it's not his main focus like the Maharal. The Maharals, Yehuda Low, who lived about 600 years ago, 500. Yeah, he's the one with the Maharal from Prague. There's the one who made the golem. He brought a piece of earth to life as like a sort of like a mythological golem, like you might have heard of. He did it to protect the Jewish people. There's a discussion whether he actually did it in the end. He said he was going to, but some evidence that he did do it, and it's still there in the attic of his synagogue today. The story about Nazis which went into the synagogue of the Maharal in the Second World War. They went into the attic, they screamed, and they didn't come back down. So yeah, it could be the golem was still on guard to protect the Jewish people even then, hundreds of years later. All right. Anyway, but the Maharal, incredible human being. It's just mind, but you just study his works and you get an idea of how the depth of his understanding and stressing that the words of the sages are words of sagesness. They're words to do with the sage aspect of them, the wisdom aspect. They're not people who happen to be sages. We're studying the words of sages. That means the words relating to their wisdom itself, rather than the people who are saying the wisdom. They're speaking on the level of abstraction, of knowledge. It's not the words of people who have wisdom. These are words of wisdom. That's what the Aggadah is, the words of wisdom. Or Chochmas Kaballah, it's the wisdom of the Kabbalah. Right? It's that abstraction which we're looking for. And most of the lectures I give on this channel, you'll be familiar with. We're always going on that level every time. We're trying to understand the roots of everything, spiritual roots. So it's Kabbalistic level or the philosophical level, however you want to call it. There's a big overlap between the two ideas. Jewish philosophy and Kabbalah could even be the same thing. One could be a subset of the other. All right. Let's finish off now. So using these tools, a person can understand Kabbalah and uncovers such beautiful and sublime ideas, which are just lying beyond the words and the superficial pictures and imagery which you get from reading the stories. There's such depth which lies beyond it, and in fact, the more strange the story sounds. The stories sound, you can tell that the rabbis were even more worried people misinterpret this idea, so they wanted to hide it even from the people who are already abstract thinkers. But you're not that abstract, they can understand this idea, so we're going to make this story ridiculously superficial sounding and even heretical sometimes, because this is only for the real special refined minds who are meant to, the most pure of minds who are worthy of accessing these ideas without corrupting them. Okay, so that's the introduction to Kabbalah. Give you an overview of exactly how to think of the different levels of the Oral Torah, how Kabbalah fits into it. We spoke about the written Torah and the oral Torah. The oral Torah is being an expression of the written Torah. It's how we bring out how the Torah relates to us. But then there's different levels of us perceiving the truth of the Torah. That's in the 4 levels of the oral Torah. Pshat, the basic meaning, remez, hints, or allusions. Drash, or Drash is exegesis, deriving things which are really hidden. You have to have the tools. And then sod, which are the secrets, which are things which are ideas which transcend the physical completely. They don't have any physical manifestation like the other 3 levels do. You can always work with on an imagery level as well with the other 3 levels, even though they do contain within themselves certain levels of abstraction. Whereas it comes to the Kaballah, or the Soid, the hidden, the secret level, it's only abstraction, right? And we're going to see that this corresponds to 4 worlds, the physical world being the lowest one, and that corresponds to Pshat. Then there's another level where the angels are, that's called the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, and that corresponds to Remes. Then Drash is another level where you've got God's holy throne, and you've got the seraphs, the highest of all the angels in that world. And you've got palaces, spiritual palaces, where God's light can be manifest on a very high level. That's brilliant. That corresponds to Drash. And that would mean that the 4th level up, which is Atzilus, which is total spirituality, right? If you remember, we spoke about the 7 levels of in the Pesach lecture. We're going to the different meaning of Pesach, of Passover. We're passing over from one dimension to the other. So this level, the 4th level, will actually be the spiritual dimension. That's the one where there isn't anything except God. Right? We spoke about this in the very first Hanukkah lecture a couple of years ago. The idea of Yom Echad. Right? There was light and there was dark on day 1. It doesn't say the first day. It means day 1, the day where God was one. Right? And that's referring to this 4th world going up, which is the world of Atzilus, which means the world of closeness, where on that level it's just God, and anything in that world is just a way of expressing God's reality to us, right? So you talk about his characteristics, you talk about God being the Father of the world, being the merciful one, right? We're going to speak about these in detail, hopefully, in the next lecture. So, and that corresponds to Soid, the secrets, which lines up very nicely, because Soid is that level of total abstraction, but there's no physical clothing or facade for the concepts at all. We're just dealing with the concepts themselves. That means when we speak about God, we're not talking about how God relates to the world. We're talking about how God relates, full stop, without referring to any landing pad, I guess you'd say, for God's manifestation to be manifest in a certain place. These are the things which we refer to as God. Not that it's God itself, but those are God's names. Those are God's... It's the light which is coming from God, which allows us to connect with Him. That's what's happening in this 4th level. We have to expand on that much more, but for example, the 10 Sephiros are there, right? The 10 lenses through which God connects to us. God being our Father, our Creator. These are all different aspects of God which are in this level here, right? And God's names, the 4-letter name, Elohim, Shaka, all the names are all there. It's very detailed. That's a whole study of Kabbalah, study in detail everything which is going on in that dimension, that world, right? And that world, nothing physical at all. Only concepts, only the ideas. But remember, ideas are more real than physical. So it's not, they're only ideas. That's true reality we're talking about there. Okay, so right, so that's what we spoke about today. Anything else which I have to mention? Hopefully next time we're going to speak more about speak about these worlds in more detail. Why God created the world? What He did to achieve that purpose, and the whole system, the whole structure, the whole hierarchy. And maybe if we're lucky, I'll remember to include where we see some of these ideas actually manifest themselves in the physical once they ripple through the different worlds until they hit this world. You'll see the parallels. Might mention the 10 Sephiros. We see the 10 Sephiros in the number 10 here. We spoke about 10 fingers, right? 10 aspects to the body. Supposed to be 5 worlds. We're going to speak about. We mentioned just now the 5 personal pronouns when referring to God, right? Nothingness, something. That's something from nothing. There's the first 2 levels. Then you've got Him. That means God as someone who is out of our reach, but we recognize as someone who is trying to relate to us, than you, than me. Those are the 5 which we're talking about. Yeah, there's so much to talk about. It's just mind-boggling. You can see I've actually got myself lost for words, because now I've literally got too much to talk about. It's too much. So we're going to leave that for the next lecture. All right. I hope you enjoyed that. So we've got a nice introduction to Kabbalah now. Introduction. I'm going to title this Introduction to the Oral, the written Oral Torah and Kabbalah, because really we've spoken so much about the Oral Torah that hopefully got a very good idea about the details, how the workings of the Oral Torah is. So hopefully, especially for the non-Jews out there who have heard about the Oral Torah and the rabbinical Torah, as it's referred to, understand it's something much more than just rabbis taking the only Torah we get and then making their own stuff. It's not like that at all, right? There are allusions to the Oral Torah in the written Torah itself. Chapter 17 in Deuteronomy clearly says, if you've got any doubts or anything, you should go up to the rabbis of in your day, right? So that means even today, you go to the Torah scholars and they'll tell you in Hazinu, in chapter 32 at the beginning, you got chapter 32 verse 7, right? Ask your father and they'll tell you. Ask your elders and they'll tell you. The Torah is not meant to be something which you just pick up and work out yourself. It comes with a whole tradition. It's impossible for a person to work it all out by himself just by reading the written law. As we said, the most fundamental thing is you can't even read the words without the oral tradition. We just happen for convenience now the oral tradition of how to put the vowels in and the punctuation is only a later inclusion just to make it easier for people to read. But before then, you have to have a teacher, otherwise you don't know how to read the words at all, right? So the Oral Torah includes all of that, and ultimately it's those lenses through which God wants to shine the Torah, which is the written Torah, through us, for us to become part of the Torah, right? That we become those filters, and each person who studies Torah brings out a certain new angle to appreciating Torah which no one else can do. Just like each filter is unique for the light which comes down, each one's got its nice picture, stained glass picture, where the line shines through. Oh, that's a beautiful picture. But really it's a new way of appreciating the light, right? So each one of us who studies Torah is essentially doing the same thing, as long as we study it properly, right? And of course, if a person takes the light, I guess in that analogy, and he starts, he takes a different thing, a different source of light, and starts to look how beautiful the light of the Torah is. He's not expressing the light of the Torah. He's doing his own personal thing, right? So you have to know that you're actually expressing true ideas of the Torah, which can be traced to the Torah and not your own ideas. And that's the Oral Torah. I'm going to see, hopefully, if I remember, I should really write this down, how the written Oral Torah are alluded to in the actual source code of creation in the world of Atzilus, in that fourth world. For those who are familiar with Kabbalah, it's Zer Anpin and Nukva, right? It's the six sephiros of Chesed, kindness through to Yesod, foundation, and the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah corresponds to the Oral Torah, right? So, in a way, when we learn Torah, we are connecting ourselves with the Shekhinah. I'm not going to go beyond that, but the written Torah is the level just above the Shekhinah. So you talk about one thing as the expression of the other one. It's referred to as a husband and wife. So think of the written Torah and the oral Torah as like a marriage. Many ways of expressing it. These ideas all parallel with each other, and God, the book of Song of Songs, we refer to as the wife of God, right? That's the idea of the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah. Okay, we'll leave it at that. If you don't understand that, good, right? So just think of it as marriage, whatever. And for those who are abstract, you'll understand the depth of what I just said. So we'll leave you with that. Okay, thanks for listening, everyone. Sorry we didn't get into the actual Kabbalistic bit so much as I wanted to, but I think we'd better save it for another time. All right, thanks for listening. All the best.